Hey there, I'm Denise. Welcome to Fully Alive Today. Well, if you have been on this planet for any length of time, you know that there are times when life kind of feels like it's shaking around you. It can be a big shaking or a little shaking. It can come during, major life challenges, maybe a health crisis or a big financial downturn or even challenges to our relationships. Can also come in life transitions, some of the major life transitions like becoming an empty nester or a big career change or even stepping into retirement. Storms are going to come. That's just part of life. But we can prepare for them, and how we prepare can make all of the difference.
Hi there, I'm Denise. I started this fully alive journey after winning a pretty tough battle with cancer. I came away with a whole new perspective and appreciation for life. Now, as I'm leaning into retirement, I'm discovering and sharing practical ways to live a fully alive life for many years to come.
You may have heard this phrase that we repeat what we don't repair. And Hebrews says it really interestingly to me. It says, "Make straight paths for your feet, lest that which is lame or weak be turned out of the way or get worse, but rather let it be healed." These weak areas in our life, they don't go away if we just ignore them or push through them. They need some attention and care because they can be healed and strengthened and offer a great support to our life. Here's a really good picture of what these supports or pillars do for us. So we had this house in Oregon. It was on the Oregon coast, and I'll pop some pictures up here. And it was built in 1948. It's just a beach cottage. And after we bought it, we discovered that the supports or the pillars that were holding this house up were just stacks of bricks. And over years, those had started to crumble and fail, and the house is starting to tilt a little bit. On the outside, it didn't look that bad. But, when we got in there and looked a little closer, we realized that this house was not standing on good supports. So I guess we could have ignored it and, it sat there for that long. Maybe it would sit for a few more years. But instead, what we did was we took the time and the effort to build in new supports under that house. And it was effort, it was work, but oh my gosh, when it was done, it just, I don't know, stood up taller. It looked happier. It looked loved. On the Oregon coast, we would get winter storms with winds beating against the house. We were right on the front line of those storm winds. We'd get 80-mile-an-hour winds. And after it was set and strong and felt more stable, it brought such a confidence and a peace to the inhabitants of the house when those storms would come. They didn't feel so scary or threatening. And that's true of our life as well. When we are stable, when we have supports under us, and you can't just build a house on one support. The more support pillars that you have, the more stable that house is going to be. And again, that's the way our life is. I've discovered, maybe in my years, a little bit of wisdom, and have found that there are 6 key pillars that offer that kind of stability to my life in the good times, but especially when the storms come. Storms do have a way of exposing those kind of weak areas in our life. And having these strong pillars doesn't mean the storms won't come. Storms are going to come, but they do kind of hold everything together while the storm passes. When I retired, I thought it was a good time to do this kind of life check, pillar check, if you would. Everything looked pretty good on the outside, but I wanted to make sure that I didn't have any blind spots or areas that needed attention, to just kind of assess and then track where I am, how I'm doing, and then, put a plan together to strengthen maybe areas that had been neglected. And so what I did was I put together an Excel spreadsheet with these 6 key pillars, and I would track them on a weekly basis to see how I was doing. And, some were really strong, some were not so, strong. It was quite illuminating to look at it on paper. You know, in my head, I can kind of think, yeah, I'm doing okay. But when you start putting it down on paper, um, it really can be eye-opening. So I did put that Excel spreadsheet. I kind of converted it into this real easy to use PDF. I call it my Thrive by Design weekly tracker. And I've linked it in the description below. That's free if you want to take a look at it and either use it as is, or maybe it'll be just kind of generate some ideas for you to create your own weekly tracker. So these 6 key pillars, here we go. We've got our spiritual pillar, we've got physical health, then we have emotional and mental health, then purpose and meaning, then we have relationships, and then finally we have fun, relaxation, and rest. And one important thing to note is this number 1 spiritual pillar. You know, it can show up as a strong pillar during a storm, but it can also show up as a challenge during that storm. So it can work both ways. There's this scripture in James 1:2-4. It says, "Count it all joy." I know that's a mind blower. "Count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations or trials or the storm hits." We're to count it all joy. "Knowing this," and this is how we can count it joy, "knowing this, that the trying of our faith," that spiritual pillar that's being shaken, and I look at it like someone's trying to push me off of what I believe, that trying of my faith, it works patience, because that patience is a steadfast endurance. It says, I'm not moving off of what I know to be true. And so that, I don't know, exercise during a storm, that standing strong, that steadfast endurance, what it does, it says, let that have its perfect, its complete work, so that you will be perfect and entire. That means mature, stable, lacking nothing. So that's the count it all joy when a storm hits, because you know it's going to grow you, it's going to mature you, and then you'll be ready for the next storm. So we're going to run through just a few of these life challenges that happen and look at these key pillars and see how they're kind of either being challenged, and then what pillars might be remaining strong, because it's really helpful during storms if you have these 6 pillars, if most of them are holding strong during the storm while one is being rebuilt or challenged. So first we're going to start with a empty nest scenario. And for me, that was probably, I know, it's hard to believe, the biggest storm in my life. We have one son, our gift from God. And, you know, we were so close. I loved being his mama. I homeschooled him, and, you know, it just brought so much joy and delight and focus to my life. But, you know, little boys grow up. And it was time for him to grow up and be a man. And it was really hard for me to let him go. He probably knew that. And so that letting go was a little traumatic, to say the least. So it was not on the best terms. He left, he was 18. And for a few years, he got out there in the world and figured life out on his own. And I wasn't there to protect him and make sure he was taken care of. So that challenge, the pillars that were challenged there were my relationship pillar, because that was a big part of my life, being his mama. And then the mental emotional was, that was not a strong pillar at that time. That's when I learned that scripture in James about count it all joy. And so those are the 2 pillars that were being challenged big time. But interestingly, the pillar that was holding me strong during that storm was purpose and meaning. And, you know, God is so good, as he was taking care of me during my son's stepping into manhood. My husband and I had just moved to the Chicago suburbs to start a ministry. And boy, it took a lot of focus and time and attention. And so I felt like that pillar of purpose was really holding strong, while a couple of these other pillars were just being shaken pretty severely. The next life challenge that I thought I would share with you is this career challenge. This move to the Chicago suburbs and starting a ministry, it challenged me, I guess, mentally, emotionally. It's way bigger than what I could do on my own, and saw God come through in some tremendous ways. But it was 60, 70 hour work week. And not just doing, kind of rote things that you're used to. I was learning so much. So there were those emotional and mental challenges of being kind of out of my depth and then straining my brain to put all of this together. But there were also physical challenges. And maybe you're connecting with this if you have a job that's really just all consuming and taking up so much of your life. And so that physical challenge, there were days that we would literally say, do you want to eat or do you want to sleep? We had no time for anything. And often we chose, let's sleep, because we could grab, forgive me, a bag of chips and a Coke in between, what's going on. And so, it did take a physical toll on us as well. So those were the pillars that were being challenged. But the pillars that were holding strong, wow, it was that purpose and meaning, but also relationships. We got to know such wonderful people. As we are out there, out of our depth, God brought wonderful people around us, and those relationships are still so very precious to me. Some of the best relationships I've ever had, deepest relationships. And so those were the pillars that were holding strong. Another major life challenge for me personally was when I was in my mid 40s. I was diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer. And I did not see that coming. Going through chemo and treatment for cancer, my body did not hold up well to that. I had never been so weak in my life. I was staring into both barrels of death. I really was that close. I called it my walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And so that was challenging me physically, and then emotionally and mentally in my mid 40s. I'm not ready to, check out. And so those were some big challenges. But the pillar that held strong, especially I saw in that time, mainly my spiritual pillar, but the relationships, again, that God brought into my life. And these were pillars that were established through this ministry that we had started up. And so that pillar had been built, and it was holding strong through this time. My pastors just were there for me so much. They would come and sit with me. Friends that came out of this ministry that we started, they would come over and feed me meals and clean my house and pray over me. And one gal, she was a missionary in Uganda, and she had recently come back to the Chicago land area just for a short period of time. And as coincidence, God would have it, she was a nurse, and she would come and stay with me, sleep in my spare bedroom, and really help me to navigate all that medical field. I just wasn't there as sharp as I wanted to be. If you've ever gone through chemo, you know what that can do to you mentally. And my husband was his job took him out of town for days at a time. And so those relationships, wow, that was a pillar that held me strong. And then finally, my last, not nearly as traumatic as maybe some of these others, but it was stepping into retirement. Having a career that was so fulfilling and such a part of my life, that so much of my life was built around, to step away from that and into retirement. I'd say probably the biggest pillar that was being challenged, and maybe still is that purpose and meaning. But the pillar that's holding strong right now is my physical health. Hallelujah for physical health. But also this rest, fun, and relaxation. And I mentioned that, when I was doing this weekly tracker, there was an illuminating pillar. This was it. I grew up in a family, a big family, where that was not highly valued. And so retirement is offering a wonderful time for me to begin to strengthen that pillar in my life. So some pillars you may find are strong, and they carry you through those times when other pillars are either being challenged or strengthened, or maybe it's a complete rebuild. But when we have those other pillars, it really does offer a stability and a balance during those times of rebuild. So here's my encouragement to you today. A fulfilling, stable, balanced, fully alive life isn't one without storms. Storms are going to come, but it's one that has these 6 pillars that kind of stabilize and hold life up when the storms do come. And you don't have to work on all 6 pillars at once. Probably would advise against that. But one may bubble up, may surface and think, that's one that I'd like to track a little more. I'd like to assess how I'm doing with that, or maybe use this tracker to see how you're doing on all 6. And like I said, start with one. So we repeat what we don't repair. If something needs to be healed, strengthened, rebuilt, take time to do that so that when those storms, those inevitable life storms come, they don't feel as threatening. We have our pillars strong and stable, and we can face life with a confidence and a peace. So here's to building our balanced, stable, strong, fully alive life, one pillar at a time.